Hey folks, welcome into the PFI College Football Show on Pro Football Ireland, Ireland's biggest, Ireland's best podcast network for American football. Michael McQuaid, Conall Diggin. Conall, first off, welcome in. Dara Carger is AWOL this week. I believe Dara might be in the Hatfield House or Filthy McNasty's in Belfast. Big shout out to all the students on their Freshers Week. I'm very jealous, Dara. Very, very jealous. I think Dara's enjoying himself.
Yeah, I mean, with what's going on in Galway this week, like knowing half the stuff that's happening this week, I can only imagine what it's like back for them this week. I mean, we had like 2 weeks back, and then the first years come in, but up in nice old Belfast, everyone gets to go in all at one time. So I can only assume every place is absolutely chock a block.
Chaka Chaka, mate, as I say up here in that Belfast accent. Just before we start, folks, Home Field Apparel still having to give Conall or Dara their jerseys. However, they're coming to some of them sitting right over here. Use code Ireland 15% off. Let me remind you to give them next Sunday in Wembley, Conall. Looking forward to that,
Okay.
sir. The Jacksonville Jaguars against the Falcons. Let's stick back to college football. Before we do that, Conall mentioned Belfast as a thank you to, I haven't even told Conall this, as a thank you to members for Pro Football Ireland and fans and everyone that's helped us over what's been an incredible 1 year. We celebrate our first year the last week in November. 21st November on Tuesday, Phoebe Schechter is in Belfast with us. The week of Thanksgiving, £5 in. £5. We're not even making a profit in this. Phoebe's coming over for the crack. We're going to have a great night. Linktree, linktr.ee/NFL Ireland in Deer's Head. It's going to be a great night. And it's funny, Conall, because this, like, for the 1 week for Dara Carger to miss this, what a week. Before we even touch about games, Florida State at Clemson, Ole Miss at Alabama, UCLA at Utah, Colorado at Oregon, Oregon State at Washington State, Ohio State at Notre Dame, Iowa at Penn State. Before we look at that, anything catch your eye last week? I mean, for me, waking up on Sunday morning and seeing that you two boys were still awake for Colorado against CSU. I'm not gonna lie, I woke up at 6 a.m. our time, and it was going to overtime. I was like, it's absolutely brilliant. So I sat up and watched it in bed. This is fantastic. So I feel like I missed nothing. But it was in what was a bit of a weird weekend in college football. There were still some interesting things, I guess, highlighted by the whole ESPN, Pat McAfee, Will Dion shake the hand, etc. We've had a bit of movement with Mel Tucker as well over the last 24 hours in terms of recording. There's never a dull moment in college football, mate.
Yeah, I mean, this weekend, I think it's kind of one of those things where if you think nothing is going to happen, something does end up happening. Because this weekend in particular, we were coming into it, and like last week we were looking at the games and we were kind of like, which ones do we cover? Because there's not a whole lot going on, and then it ends up being one of the best weekends I can remember. I mean, Florida State, who we're going to talk about soon, only won by 2 points against Boston College, and it was a really weird game because they basically wear the exact same like kits. And when I was watching the game, Florida State had like a white helmet on because instead of like their usual kind of gold helmet. So whenever I'd see something happen for the gold helmet, I'd be like, oh, Florida State's after doing something here. And then it's Boston College. And then Wyoming against Texas was 10-10 by the end of the third quarter. You're like, this is not the team we saw against Alabama. They came out and then finished 31-10 for Texas. So it's alleviated any of the pressure on them, I guess. Alabama then 17-3 went through two quarterbacks in the game. Tyler Buchner started the game. He's a transfer, and then Ty Simpson, he played basically the second half and wasn't that good. Like, this was a very, very poor game from Alabama. Allowed 5 sacks to FAU, which was not impressive at all. Missouri hits a walk-off 61-yard field goal, which for college football is not common at all. I mean, it's not even common in the NFL. And that came after they had a delay of game penalty just before that. So they made it harder for themselves and still did it. Colorado and Colorado State, obviously probably best game of the weekend. Massive, massive comeback in that. Ohio then beat Iowa State, sorry, 10-7. Cincinnati lost to Miami of Ohio. Oklahoma State lost to South Alabama 33-7. And like they had to pay South Alabama $300,000 to come and play them, and then they go and lose. They basically paid $300,000 to lose. Stanford lost to Sacramento State 30-27, and Stanford's new head coach was Sacramento State's head coach last season. And they're an FCS school, not even an FBS school. And then I guess we should apologize to all the Florida fans because all of us picked them to win. and they beat Tennessee in a pretty convincing fashion.
Well, if there was ever a job interview for the PFI college football show, Conall, I think you've used it for the next 10 years. Unbelievable. People don't even see it off camera. Like yourself, Dart, like I'm trying to watch as much as I can on Saturday without getting divorced. I'm loving it. Like I really feel for the first time in my career that we're really getting into the college football in Ireland, which is awesome. And I think that goes by just the feedback that I've heard from people listening to this. So folks, we massively appreciate it. If you've any feedback, info@profootball.ie, you can email us or hit us up on X, Instagram, or TikTok, NFL Ireland, and we'll certainly take it into account. But really enjoying it, Conall, and let's get into some matchups. So it's probably more of an express show this week. It's going to be hard to put them into YouTube segments, but even just the one episode, there's some great games. And yeah, you mentioned Colorado. I think we'll leave them to the end because like I feel like we've gave them a lot of time over the last few weeks, but it's a hell of a game not to talk about. We'll talk about it. Notre Dame-Ohio State. Notre Dame ranked ninth in the US, Conall. The Scarlet and Grey, the Buckeyes going to South Bend for the first time since 1996 to take on a guy who was a former Ohio State linebacker in Marcus Freeman and the Fighting Irish. It seems like only yesterday you were asking Sam Hartman a question at 11 at night, Conall. But, from that game in Dublin to now, they have played very well, Notre Dame, but the argument would be that Notre Dame have not had a serious game yet until this point. This is a hell of a game. Ohio State, they're going to be playing is it UCLA in a few weeks as well. They're going to have a few big matchups for Notre Dame, but this is a start really for Notre Dame and really a start for the Buckeyes as well. I mean, the Buckeyes had a win over Indiana, Western Kentucky, Youngstown State. So this is like a sort of a baptism of fire, and this is a great game to see how the Buckeyes and their offensive line with McCord are going to handle themselves, and with McCord at quarterback, and also to see how Sam Hartman can take that next level. He really does accelerate and improve the passing game for Notre Dame. But when you're looking at a guy that completes 70% of his throws with Hartman and you put him into a game against Ohio State, it's a whole different kettle of fish. I love this game. I think Notre Dame edge it on Saturday by a field goal. Am I being controversial? What's your thoughts on this game?
This game is basically, whoever wins this kind of sets themselves apart, I guess, for the season. I mean, like it's the first like real opportunity both teams will have to, play, like no offense to the teams they have played, but to play a real team who's like a contender for, at least a minimum, eight or nine wins, and even if Ohio State got 8 or 9 wins, I think they'd be very, very disappointed. But it's really interesting because, you kind of look at both rosters, and I was looking at them and they match up like very well against each other. I mean, Ohio State has Jack Sawyer and JT Tuilamalau. I don't know how to fully pronounce that name, but they're both edge rushers, and neither of them have a sack, but they're very, very highly rated. Could be first round picks in the next draft. But they're coming up against Joe Alt and Blake Fisher, the offensive tackles for Notre Dame, and we saw them like even when I was down on field level, I stood like just a little bit away from Joe Alt, and he's 6'7", and I'm just about 5'10". So it was, I can only imagine if you're someone else standing next to them, how intimidating that is. And then, they both have really good running backs, in Audric Estime, probably my favorite player for Tang. And then you have Trevin Henderson, who was, former like top running back in his class, probably a top 4 running back coming into the draft next year, if he does want to enter. And, they have, if you're talking about Ohio State, you can't not talk about Marvin Harrison Jr., the best wide receiver by far, probably the best wide receiver we've seen in, 4 or 5 years. I'd say he's like that level of talent. Like it's insane how good he is. And, but Notre Dame have really good cornerbacks in Cam Hart and Benjamin Morrison as well. So, this Notre Dame haven't beaten them since 1936. It'll be really, really close. Looking at the last few games, there have been good things, there have been bad things from each team. I mean, Notre Dame's interior pass rush or pass rush defense hasn't been great, but then Ohio State's passing game didn't really do anything until against Western Kentucky. So I'll be really interested to see how this game plays out.
Yeah, but 21-10 last year. I didn't know it was that long since they've actually beat them. That's incredible. The game will be on Sky in Ireland and the UK and Europe. Well, I was going to say Europe. It's not going to be in Europe. It's going to be in Ireland and the UK only. They have every Notre Dame home game. And just finally, for me, you talk about Cal McCord. They had a very, very quiet start against Western Kentucky last week, and to say they started slow would be like an understatement. But they were fantastic in the second half. They cannot
49,
afford to be like that.
49 points in a row, I believe, is what they had.
They cannot. They cannot. Sorry, second. Like they cannot do that going into South Bend on Saturday. Like that cannot happen. Like, but you feel like for Marcus Freeman and for Notre Dame that this is the opportunity now to take that step. If they're going to be playing big games in the next few weeks, and for a number of teams we're going to talk about tonight, week 4 in college football is certainly now about putting the marker down for the rest of the season. So time will tell. Really looking forward to seeing it. There's so many different, as you've said there brilliantly, there's so many different elements to the game. So we will see what happens. We'll talk about Colorado at the end. I have them next on our list, but we'll go there at the end. A team that's going to London, going to Dublin. We're going to London next week. FSU are coming to Dublin in 2024 for the Aer Lingus College Football Classic. Excited to see that against Georgia Tech. Seen the team out in Atlanta a couple of weeks ago. Shout out to them. They're playing Clemson, and I think this is the first time that we're talking about Clemson on this podcast,
Yeah.
Conall, which is interesting. SEC conference matchup, you would argue, is one of the biggest matchups of the season for FSU. They're 3-0. They're playing Clemson on Saturday at 5 o'clock our time. It's weird because, for Florida State, they really need to go in and win this game to keep their season going. Like they need to sort of put the marker down after beating LSU in week 1 and getting I think it was Boston College but last week. They need to continue and try and allow themselves to continue to put that marker down, because when you're going to play an opponent in Clemson are going to have a serious hump on their back after losing 28-7 against Duke. A really, really poor start to the season. But Florida State's offense have been superb. How can they get to that next level against Clemson? That's going to be the big question. When you've got Will Shipley for Clemson, there are a few questions for me. I just feel like after week 1, it's like, could they go in this weekend and the same could happen to them? It's a season defining game for both teams. I guess for us, for neutrals, Conall, it's going to be how will Florida State prepare? Because the bet, like we want to see them as high up as possible before they go to Dublin next year. I know there's a lot of guys that won't be there next year, but for us, that's what I want to see. Florida have had 462 yards per game in offense. This is going to be a shootout, in my opinion. I'll take Clemson because they're at home by a field goal. Is that controversial?
I would say that's controversial, even though like when I was like preparing for this and like every time I was looking at Clemson's team, I was like, wow, this player's really good. This player's really good. They have a quarterback, Cade Klubnik, who's like, just one of those quarterbacks who like 5-star quarterbacks out of Texas every single year. There's always one of them, and they're always the next best thing, the next like Drew Brees or Kyler Murray or whatever like that. But it's really interesting because that their loss to Duke is very surprising, was very surprising. But it's not a bad Duke team. Like this was definitely one of the teams that people had coming into the year. It's like watch them, coming in. I mean, their QB Riley Leonard is probably going to go drafted at least in probably the first 3 rounds. I think next year he's very, very talented, and they have really good players. You mentioned Will Shipley at running back. They have Nate Wiggins at cornerback, one of the probably top 2 or 3 type cornerbacks coming in next year. And then I really actually like their linebackers. Jeremiah Trotter Jr., if you're an NFL fan, his dad was a former All-Pro for the Eagles. And then you have Barrett Carter, who's, another linebacker piece, more like the new style kind of coverage type linebackers. So I'm really interested to see, how these two teams match up against each other. But I mean, FSU this year, maybe other than last week, their offense obviously is still really good. And Jordan Travis was injured for part of the game last week. He went out and then came back just into the second half as well. So it's kind of important to keep that. I guess you'd maybe worry about the defense because this, it's not a very talented Boston College team. They lost a pretty bad game earlier in the year, but they have a lot of draft talent. Their wide receivers are just like massive human beings. Like they have a 6'4" wide receiver in Keon Coleman, and Johnny Wilson is 6'7", and then their tight end is 6'3". So it kind of like bucks all the trends when it comes to height and that sort of stuff when it comes to them. But I think this FSU team, if they win this game, which I think they will, they've at least written themselves in for at minimum a conference championship appearance, because like the rest of their schedule is pretty weak. I mean,
Do you
looking
think if
at
they
it
win
now.
this game, they could be in with a shout for fourth, or do you think it's too
Oh,
far off? But
no, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, looking at their schedule, like they play Duke in a couple of weeks. They're ranked, but I'm not sure if they'll be ranked when they get there. They play Miami, who, they've been pretty good this year, and they also play Florida in the last week of the season. That's obviously a rivalry game, but looking at this Florida team right now, Florida State team, I'd pick them pretty much over any one of their remaining, people they're going up against. And right now they're in fourth place in the AP poll, so I absolutely could see them making it. I mean, I had them basically in fifth place coming into the year, and so we'll see how they do. I think they do win this one and make the playoff.
I love how we're on both sides of the spectrum here. Like we should have asked Dark Harger for his picks, but at least this week I haven't called you Daria. I'll take that and run for the hills, mate. That's gonna be a good game. I'm looking forward to that. Like this is a real pity when we don't have these games on TV here now. It's like legally, of course, we encourage everyone to watch games legally before we get in trouble with anybody here. But like genuinely, it's a pity that we can't watch that legally because that's a great game. I think ESPN's in South Bend this weekend, so I'm looking forward to
Yeah,
watching that. I
and
enjoy.
and by the way, Notre Dame are wearing green for this game because I know Derek Carragher was very upset that they weren't wearing green in Ireland, but yeah, they saved
Why
it
the
for, I
hell did
guess,
not wear
this
green in
game.
Ireland? Like I love the uniforms they had, and do you know what the funny thing is? I only seen it whenever I got home that night or the day after that they had the tricolor on the helmets. Like because I was so far up and like I didn't see anything. Do you know what I mean? I wasn't looking at the pictures of it. I was just watching the game. It seems like a real missed opportunity. Anyway, Notre Dame podcast coming next year on Pro Football Ireland. It's not. Well, we'll see. We'll see. Shout out to the lads. Oregon State, Washington State. Beavers, Cougars, the lads. It's the Beavers. I don't know why I was calling them the Cougars earlier on. It's obviously the Beavers. The Beavers. A ranked Pac-12 matchup. RIP Pac-12 or whatever it's called these days. Under the lights. This is your sort of time here. Very, very late for us, mate. Oregon State, Washington State, week 4. Oregon State's offense so far this season has been unreal, But do you know what their strength of schedule is out of 133 FBS programs?
No, I haven't checked.
121st. So just calm the
Oh,
bets here.
I can see it. I'm looking at it now, and I can see why that is.
That's mad. Like, but look, at the end of the day, they've done what they've had to do so far. Washington State have got, I think they're 59th in terms of their ranking, and just with the strength of schedule, they had a really, really big 9-point win against Wisconsin 2 weeks ago. The last time both these teams played, Oregon State won 24-10 at home. If you look at Oregon State, their quarterback is, I can't pronounce the quarterback's name, DJ.
Oh yeah, I knew we were going to get to this. I meant to send you a video on how to pronounce it. It's DJ Uyunglele.
Uyunglele.
Yeah.
Class. You're worth your weight in gold, man. DJ Uyunglele. He had a pretty weird week last week. They had a 26 or 26-9 win over San Diego State. 14 to 30 passes, 284 yards, 2 interceptions on the day. And you think to yourself, well, if that happens again this week, there could be a serious problem. And Washington State will try and bounce on that. Washington State have got to a situation where they've won in this game before. I said the last 2 times that they've played with DJ. I'm not going to call him his surname anymore. He left Clemson. He was quite a volatile quarterback at that time. He's had a solid enough performance. He had a good win first week against San Diego or San Jose State. So it's an intriguing game. I'll not be up for it, mate. I wish I could be up for it, but it's certainly one that we sort of looked at and put the marker on before we looked at week 4.
Yeah, and this is the battle of the Pac-2. They're the two teams who don't know where they're going to be next year. While everyone,
where are they going to be is the question. I mean, they're hardly going to have it's like Celtic and Rangers in the Scottish League, isn't it?
Maybe they go independent, but it looks like it's probably going to be the Mountain West Conference for them, or the American Conference. The American Conference is probably the best of, the best of the rest is probably the best way to put it for them. That's maybe their best case scenario. But yeah, I mean, I like these two teams. They have just one or two good players that you pick out, and you're like, this guy, he's a solid enough player. I mean, the Washington State quarterback Cam Ward, he was playing like FCS football. He's come in this year, has 900 yards, 950 yards in 3 games, and 50 rushing yards, which leads the team because this is an air raid offense through and through. Since the Mike Leach days, since he was here, and like he's been really good this year. Has a lot of touchdowns, and then their leading wide receiver Victor reads if he gets 12 more receptions, sorry, Lincoln Victor, sorry, is his name. If he gets 12 more receptions, he matches his career high, and then he already has passed his career high in 3 games for receiving yards and matched them in touchdowns. So, clearly he's just stuck around long enough to where he finally gets to play a bit more. But I think the thing with this Oregon State team is, they have Uiagalelei, who, was the replacement for Trevor Lawrence for so long, and then, obviously didn't really work out for him. And, they have some good players, Damian Martinez at running back, but their pass defense is not great. I mean, we saw it last week, even against San Diego State, and they weren't great there. And, coming up against an air raid offense where all they're going to do is pass the ball or maybe the odd scramble, that's basically like the only thing they know how to do. And the Washington State, they're a good defense because, their head coach, Watt, used to be their defensive coordinator 2 years ago. So they still have all the air raid principles with the really good defense. So I actually think, I'm actually favoring Washington State in this thing. And I think that's maybe that's just me looking too much into the whole, they're bad at the pass defense, so it won't work out. But I like them. I like them. That's the best way I can put it.
We have the resurrection of Christ this week as well, with Jim Harbaugh coming back to Michigan for the game against Rutgers. Don't be surprised if they play in Ireland in the next 2 years, next 3 years. I think they will. Now, I have no affiliation with any company. I just feel like Michigan would be a good shout to play there. I think Rutgers as well would be a team that they could play and take from a home game there if they got it. I wouldn't be surprised if we see that in 25. So we'll see. But yeah, he's back. He said he's never gonna get to that situation again. So we'll see what happens. And it's funny because
no more
not to go
burgers.
into a whole NFL talk, but all the rumors this week. Like, I mean, I've written an article this week for Pro Football Ireland in our Tuesday morning Cup and Tay article, where I personally think that Staley will be gone if he loses his weekend to Minnesota, which is the bold thing to say 3 weeks into the season. I think he'll be gone. I don't think Harbaugh would leave Michigan mid-season. That's the whole different conversation point. But I feel like this is probably his last year if something big comes up for him. Or maybe Michigan will just continue to give him a raise every summer, who knows, or every winter. Right, I feel like we talk about this every week now, but I say for at least the next 2 weeks, we're going to talk about the Buffs. Like, we're like, for people that watch this or listen to this, we're both big Broncos fans. So like, I'm getting to the point now where, like, I've been to Folsom Field twice. Like, it's like we need to stop talking about the Buffs, but it's very hard to after last week and after the manner of the victory. The thing I would say first off, they conceded way too many points against Colorado State for me, and that makes you feel like when they're going into playing Oregon at, I think is it 6:30 yard time on Saturday or 7:30? I'll double check that for people in the comments. Number 19 ranked in the country. They went down one rank because of Colorado State. All the Rams fans on my Twitter account were starting to slag them, but that people still doubt them, and I can see why people are doubting them only because of the points they're giving up. Conall, if last week or last month, Dan Lanning, who's the head coach of Oregon, said, "I'm trying to remember what they won to affect this conference. Do you remember them winning anything?" That is something to say. Oregon's 3-0. They've beat Hawaii. They've beat Texas Tech. They've completely destroyed Portland State. But Colorado's been an inspiration. Like, Jeff was on his podcast overnight talking about how impressed he was about what Deion Sanders has done to that organization. But they haven't faced a good team. Now, there is an argument that people would have expected the Buffs to be 0-2 for these first 2 games. They have defied that logic. They now sit and they've won. They're 2-0, 3-0, 3-0, 3-0, and the marker's on them. Now, this goes either one of two ways. They win this weekend and Armageddon ensues, or they get absolutely humbled. The argument would be, in my opinion, I think regardless of the outcome this weekend, they have done an incredible job since Sanders has been in there. I'm excited to see what's going to happen year on year with them. I think they'll be a bigger threat next season in the new conference. Have they a chance this weekend, Mr. College Football Expert?
I have zero clue, because I know I've been, dubbed the Colorado guy, and I think that's just because I picked them. I've basically been kind of picking them every single week, but then we came into when we did talk about them, in the Aviva Stadium, I was saying like, you know, I don't think they're going to be amazing. Like I think they're going to get about 6 wins. And I was like, if they get 6 wins, that's an amazing season from them. And now they're already halfway there. And part of me in like the back of my head is like, you kind of just have to keep picking them until they prove you wrong because you don't want to be the guy who, if you ever got to talk to Deion Sanders and for whatever reason, if he was listening to this, he'd go, "Oh, you didn't pick us to beat Oregon."
You start quote tweeting us,
Yeah,
annoying.
but like Oregon is, it's not a blue blood type thing, but they are they're Oregon. Like they've been good for about 15 years basically. They've been good. They have really good quarterback and Bo Nix. Their defense maybe is a little bit weaker than what it has been the past couple of years, but their head coach is Dan Lanning and he was Georgia's former defensive coordinator, so he knows how to coach up a defense pretty much more than anything. And it's going to be extremely interesting. Colorado don't run the ball; they just pass the ball because it hasn't really worked for them. Top two, but now at minimum top three in Heisman voting. So it's really interesting. In the back of my mind, I'm like pick Colorado, but then my actual head is saying just pick Oregon. We do the smart thing and pick Oregon. But I think what, just for the fun of it, I'm gonna pick Colorado to win, just because I don't want to be the guy who goes against them for the first time.
As we talk, I'm checking the odds with our NFL sponsor, Idiot Sport, just so I can see what the handicap is. Please bet responsibly. Oregon favored minus 20.5 in the spread. I don't think it'll be as much as that, but I do think this could be a week where the dream doesn't die, but I feel like the Buffs lose a game and it comes back a little bit to reality. I think the Buffs will get a bowl game this year, Conall. I think they will. I think
They
they'll be in the top
probably
25 to get one. I think they might lose the next 2 weeks, and then they might pick themselves up again. I think they might drop out of the rankings, top 25 rankings, after the next 2 weeks if they were to lose heavily in one of those games. Personally, but I'm not a selector. I'm sure it'll put them in a bowl game. It'll be fine. But it's like if you concede 40 odd to CSU, you're going to concede 50 minimum to Oregon. I'm sorry, like that
and
has to be the mindset here. Yeah.
they also don't have Travis Hunter because of the extremely dirty hit that was
I mean, there's
on
dirty
him.
and then there's dirty.
Yeah,
Like that was. I mean, like I feel like I'm in a safe spot here because, like, obviously I do the Steelers podcast. I seen the Chubb hit on Monday night, and I'm like, but that Hunter hit was brutal.
he was like pulling up and he wasn't running anymore. Like the play was gone and he just got blown up. But I mean, looking at Colorado's schedule now, just on right next to me, they probably have, if you let's say they lose this week, and then they lose next week to USC, they probably have one, two, probably 4 or 5 more wins that like attainable wins, in conference that they could get. So it's absolutely not out of the this world that they'll get 6 wins, which is what I said they could get at the start of the year. So they're good. Like they are good. It's just, are they great? Are they great enough to kind of take on the big dogs?
If they beat Oregon,
I don't know what's going to happen.
holy crap! If they beat Oregon and going into a game against USC, which is at a great time for us, at 10 a.m. in the morning Mountain Time, 5 o'clock our time, I'll fly over. You might be in London then. Like that's gonna be a great weekend. So looking forward to that, sir. Conall, good crack this weekend. Have you anything else you want? Have you any bold prediction this weekend that you want to throw at us without Dark Harger being here to give us his magic as well?
There's really, really, really good games this weekend, pretty much all over. Like getting down to these 4 games was tough for us to do. Probably the other one that stands out is Iowa against Penn State. It's going to be probably a defensive matchup like every single Iowa game is. But their offensive coordinator Brian Ferentz, he's seen a lot of talk about him this last week, and he wasn't too happy about it. So we'll see how that happens. But I do think Penn State win that, and they're really like Penn State, really good team, and they've been really good the past couple of weeks, and this is their first kind of real test. And if they get through this, Derek Carger might have been right at the start of the season in picking them.
Hashtag Dar was right. Hashtag DJ I can't.
Uyunglele.
Oh, good God. Anyway, here, that's us now, as we say in Belfast, boy, up here. Looking forward to this weekend. Looking forward to seeing you next weekend as well, Dar. There you go, Connell.
He's not even
We,
here.
we said Dara too much there. That's why it popped out. PFI College Football Podcast, folks. Thank you so much for the loves, subscribing to the podcast, leaving reviews, like, share, subscribing. We genuinely are humbled by it. I know I am. Anyway, I'm sure Dara and Conall both are as well. It's been a great run so far. We're only 4 weeks in. We're a third of the way through the regular season now. But we'll keep her lit. Conall, thank you very much for jumping on and taking reins this week. Appreciate it, man. See you next week, folks. Home field apparel code Ireland, 15% off. Enjoy week 4.